Hello everyone, my name is Heather and I make videos all about every aspect of the travel experience. If that is something that interests you, please be sure to take a moment to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. In today's video, I want to talk about something very fundamental to travel, and that is passports. So in this video, I want to talk about three separate things regarding passports. First of all, the basics of getting and renewing a passport. Secondly, a very critical warning about passports that's relevant to the times we're living in right now. And thirdly, the relatively complicated process of getting passports for your kids. Most of what I know about passports, I had to learn on my own. My parents didn't have passports when I was growing up. And my parents have done very little international travel or a type of travel where they would even need a passport. I'm pretty sure at this point, I'd have to double check with my mom, but I know my dad's passport has expired years ago and he has not renewed it. And I don't think my mom's used her passport in over 20 years. I got my first passport as a teenager, and that would have been when I went to do my study abroad and homestay program in Ireland when I was 16 years old. So I needed a passport for that. So that's when I got my first passport. I might have even gotten one before that. My dad and I went to the Bahamas shortly before I went to Ireland when I was 15 or 16. And that might have been when we both got our first passports, actually. I'd have to check with my dad on that. But in any case, I was a teenager when I got my first passport. All three of my kids have had passports since they were very young. I got all of them passports when they were babies or toddlers. Andrew would have had to have gotten a passport before he was 4 years old because we took a Disney cruise when he was 4 years old, and I always take passports when we cruise. Megan went on a cruise when she was 5 months old, so she had to have a passport even younger than that. And although I don't think Ben actually used his passport until he was 8 or 9, I also got him a passport when he was a baby. I have their cute little passports from when they were really young, when their little baby faces on them, and it's so cute and funny. All right, if you've had a passport in the past, you're probably going to know most of this information that I talk about here at the beginning. If you've never gotten passports for your kids, or if you're planning on having kids in the future, or lots of different situations with families and kids and passports, be sure you stay through and watch the entire video because I've got a lot of very important information to share with you later. All right, most of the information that you're going to need about getting a passport is going to be found on the travel section of the United States State Department's website. If you do not live in the United States and you are a citizen of some other country, you should have an equivalent website for your State Department in your home nation. So that's the place that I would send you to find that information. I'm going to put the link for the State Department's travel site right down below here in the description. So that's where you can find it. There is a wealth of information on the State Department's travel website, including all of the current travel cautions and warnings about countries you should not travel to. That's especially important to pay attention to right now during the pandemic, because normally the countries that are listed there, it's usually because of some kind of violence or political strife, but often there can also be health reasons that they don't want you going there too. And the current pandemic aside, there have been other outbreaks or prevalent diseases in other countries. The CDC and the State Department keep separate warning lists. Sometimes they are the same and sometimes they're not. So you're going to want to check both when you're considering whether it's safe to travel to any particular country or not. The other thing, really quick aside, that it's really a good idea to check before you travel to any country other than where you're from is you're going to want to check if you need any vaccinations. This is where I really get annoyed with people who are like, oh, you can't require people to have vaccinations to travel. Oh, yes, you can. They've been requiring people to have certain vaccinations to enter countries for a very long time. Many other countries, Africa, Southeast Asia especially, require you to have certain vaccinations. Yellow fever is one that comes to mind. before you enter that country, and you cannot travel there, or at least it's very strongly advised that you get that vaccination before you travel there. I know that when my son Andrew went to Morocco several years ago, he had to get some additional vaccinations that are not part of the normal vaccination schedule here in the United States before he went to Africa. So that's something else that you're going to want to check too. Many larger clinics and hospital, organizations will have a travel clinic, and those are the places that will specialize in knowing what vaccinations you need to travel to other places and helping you get access to those. Sometimes it can be a little tricky, like if you live in a really small town and your local doctor, they don't have those specialized vaccinations for travel. So you might have to go someplace a little bit bigger to find that, but you shouldn't have a problem getting them anywhere in the United States, at least. When you apply for a passport as an adult, it's a relatively simple process. The main thing that you're going to need, which can sometimes be a trick for people, is you have to have an official copy of your birth certificate. You must have a birth certificate to apply for a passport. There's no other way you can get a passport without a birth certificate, because passports are very unique documents. They prove two things. They prove identity, that you are who it says you are, and they prove citizenship, that you are a citizen of the country that issued this passport. That's why if you've ever filled out an I-9, which is the immigration form for employment when you get a job, it'll give you the option of either bringing like a social security card and your driver's license, or just your passport. I always take just my passport because it's way easier. And I have actually run into employers. I know when my daughter got her first job, they didn't know this. They were like arguing with me. They're like, no, she has to bring something else too, not just her passport. And I said, no, she doesn't. I've had that job, okay, in human resources. A passport proves both identity and citizenship, and it is the only document you need to show both. Passports are not easy documents to get. They don't hand them out lightly. Everything in your application has to be true. You have to provide that original copy, an official copy with a raised seal of your birth certificate. I guess the other time that you might have a different document is if you're a naturalized citizen of a country. Then you're going to have like your naturalization papers to prove that you're a citizen, because you would not be able to prove that you were born here because you weren't born here. So that's one little exception to that. If you don't personally have a copy of your birth certificate and your parents don't have it, or you're not able to get one from your parents for whatever reason, then you're going to have to go to the county courthouse of the county that you were born in. And I don't think you have to physically go there. I think you can do it by mail, but you're going to have to contact the courthouse and the Office of Vital Statistics or Public Records, the place where they keep birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, all of that. It's all the same office in every county. And you're going to have to contact them and request an official copy of your birth certificate. And that can take some time, because first of all, just figuring out where that is might be a trick for you, especially if you're not exactly sure what county you were born in, which can be true for some people. And just the process of going through that, you've got to get that step done first. So, because you can't do anything about a passport until you have that birth certificate or naturalization papers in your hand so that you can send it in to them. One thing I want to point out right here is everything you send the State Department when you apply for a passport, they send back to you. They send you back your original copy of your birth certificate. And when you renew your passport, they send you back your old passport. They punch a hole through it so you can't use it anymore and make it invalid. But when you renew by mail, and even when you do apply for a passport for your kids, you're going to get 2 envelopes back. You're going to get one special envelope with your brand new passport in it. And then you're going to get a separate envelope with your other documents that you submitted to them to get the passport. That's going to come in a separate envelope in the mail later. And you might get one first and the other one later. They won't come at the same day. They never do. So you'll get another envelope that has like your old passport in it and your birth certificate that you sent in. Although you do not need to send in your birth certificate for an adult, except for that first time. You'd send in your old passport, the one that you're renewing, and you'd send in the forms that you have to send with it and your money. Keep that in mind. Passports cost money. You have to send in money for the passport processing, and you can find that information on the website below. I'm not going to quote it here because it could change. If you want expedited processing, you need to send in additional amount of money. I think currently it's $60, which I would highly recommend, which I'm going to talk about in a minute because of the issue that we're having right now. You have to send that by check or money order. I think that's the only acceptable ways to send money to the State Department. They don't take credit cards. So the first time you're applying for a United States passport as an adult, and the subsequent times when you renew your passport every 10 years, an adult's passport is good for 10 years. It's a relatively simple process. Somebody correct me on this if I'm wrong. It's been so long I don't remember. I think if you apply as an adult, you still have to go in person the first time. Am I right or wrong about that? I'm not sure. But every time you renew your passport as an adult, you can do it by mail. You can print all the forms that you need to apply for or renew your passport on the State Department's travel website. You can also get them from county clerk at your county courthouse. And I feel like they used to be available at U.S. post offices. I'm not completely sure about that. If anybody's gotten a passport recently and has gotten forms from a U.S. post office, would you leave a comment about that below? I'd appreciate it. I can tell you that clerks at post offices know a lot about applying for passports, the proper envelope you should use, the best way to mail it, things like that. And they can be a good resource for you. Even if you're just renewing it, it's often a good idea to go to the post office and physically talk to the clerk there and have them help you with sending your stuff in. That way you guarantee you don't have any issues with the mailing part of it. One question that often comes up that you'll see in travel stuff all the time and on cruise related YouTube channels and everything is people ask all the time, do I need a passport to go on a cruise? Okay. Technically, you can take a closed loop cruise. So that's one that's leaving a U.S. city and returning to the same U.S. city. So it leaves from Miami, goes to the Caribbean, comes back to Miami. Technically on a cruise like that, you don't need a passport. You need an official copy of your birth certificate and you need a photo ID, so like a driver's license or a state ID. However, in my opinion, if you have that stuff anyway, why not just get a passport? Because once you've got a passport, it's like gold. Passports are very valuable documents. And so I don't know why you wouldn't just get a passport, because if you already have your birth certificate, you could have gotten a passport. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that you were in a time crunch and you didn't have enough time to get the passport. The other thing about taking a cruise is, if for any reason something happens and you have to get off the cruise, not in the United States, so even in the Bahamas or something, and have to make your way home from there, you're going to have major problems if you don't have a passport. Because now you're traveling internationally because you're off the ship in some other country, even Canada. If you're taking like an Alaskan cruise that stops in Canada or something, you're going to need to have that passport. Or for the sake of Canada, passport card, but that's a whole different issue. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't get a passport. We always have passports. We always take passports on our cruises. It's just much simpler. The customs and immigration people that you have to go past when you come back into the United States, I'm sure they much prefer that you have a passport. It's much simpler for them too. And for your kids, which is what I'm coming to. So I just really recommend, if you're leaving the United States in any manner, by car into Canada or Mexico, on an airplane, or on a cruise ship, I highly recommend you have a passport. Now I'm going to come to the critical warning about passports. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize and can cause a lot of problems. And that is, even though your passport might not expire until this date. I'm thinking about this for my kids right now, because I think Megan, I have to add, adult passports are good for 10 years. Kids' passports, when they're under 16, so age 0 to 16, They only last for 5 years, and there's a reason for that. They know that children's faces change a lot in a short amount of time. They grow. I mean, there's no way Megan could get on a plane to Europe right now with her passport where she looked like a baby. She doesn't look like that anymore. Even when she was 5 years old, she didn't look like that. So that's why children's passports have to be renewed every 5 years instead of every 10, like it is when you're an adult. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm thinking about when I know the kids' passports expire in early 2023. It's January, February, March. I can't remember. I have to look at them again. And I'm going to run into a problem with Ben's, which is something I'm going to come to in a minute. But okay, so you'd think, oh, we can travel right up until they expire in January 2023, right? For the vast majority of countries, and you should just assume it's all of them, you need to have at least 6 months before the date that your passport expires to be able to enter that country. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't and you get to that country, the immigration agent has the power and can turn you right back around and put you on a plane and send you home. So you need to make sure that your passport always has at least 6 months left on it when you travel to a country. Why do they do this? They do this in case for any reason you get stuck there. So that's something that can often really mess people up. Pay attention and keep your passport expiration date in mind so you can get on that right away and be thinking ahead to when it's going to expire, because you're going to want to get going with the process of getting it renewed well ahead of time. Now, a question that's come up in my mind, and I know this does happen for people, is, oh, wait a second. What if I have to get my passport renewed and I've got multiple trips? You know, they travel a lot for business or something, or they travel a lot because they have family in another country or whatever. How do I do that if I have to send my old passport away to get renewed and I need to travel in the meantime? There is a way around that. You can get a duplicate passport. You can actually hold 2 passports at the same time. Not a lot of people do that, but it is possible. And that you can find that information on the State Department's website as well. Okay, so the big warning I want to give you right now, besides that whole 6 months expiration date thing, is right now in summer of 2021, when I'm filming this, because of the pandemic, and it's been this way for quite some time, but I'm seeing a lot about it in the travel news recently. People are running into passport renewal and passport issuance nightmares. It's taking a long, long time for people to get their passports. Something similar to this happened one other time in my memory. It was after Hurricane Katrina. When you send your passport in to, or you apply for a passport, or you send your passport in for renewal, they get funneled to what's considered to be your closest passport processing center. And this sounds strange, but for us in the upper Midwest, for many years, our closest passport processing center was New Orleans. And after Hurricane Katrina, the New Orleans Passport Center was permanently closed. And so shortly after Hurricane Katrina, I think it might have been destroyed, honestly, in the hurricane, but they did not reopen it. And so all of the passports that used to go there or that were in process to go there at the time, that was a big mess. And they had to, track them all down and everything and refunnel them to a different passport processing center. I'm not exactly sure, I can't remember now where they go now. It's somewhere on the East Coast, I think. So that's something interesting to keep in mind too, is where you live determines where your passport gets processed. And mail time between those, how busy that particular passport processing center is, can be a factor. And right now, because of the pandemic and because many federal employees were laid off for the pandemic, because no one was traveling, and so nobody needed passports and all of that, they have a huge backlog of passport applications and passport renewals to process. And just like the IRS has been very backlogged in recent years, the State Department and the passport processing centers are extremely backlogged with passport applications, and it's taking them a long time to process passport applications and passport renewals. So not only do you need to keep in mind that 6 months that you need to have left on your passport when you travel somewhere, but you need to keep in mind that it's taking an especially long time right now to get passports. When I renew my passport by mail, because I've had, what have I had now? 4 or 5 passports in my life. It's super quick normally. I get that thing back really quick. It's a matter of just a few weeks. But right now, I would not expect that. So even if you're used to getting your passport renewed in a very quick, timely manner, you should not expect that right now. Which brings me to why you want to consider paying the extra money for expedited processing, because that's going to bump you up in the queue, if you will, for getting your passport processed. I've read stories in the news, and then I was talking to my son Andrew about this because has moved now to a different state, and we were talking about like his essential documents, and I was saying make sure you don't lose these things, and what's the status of your driver's license, your passport, stuff like that. And he told me that when he and his friends went to Mexico in June, 2 of his friends ran into this. They were in the process of getting their passports. Maybe they were their first passports, I'm not sure, or getting them renewed or something. And they didn't get them back in time for their trip. And they were in a panic. And they had to actually contact their U.S. representative or their senator for help in getting their passports expedited in time for them to take their trip to Mexico. They did get them because they all went. But you don't want to have to mess with that. I mean, you can do that, but sometimes they can't help you. I've read stories like that too. Sometimes by the time you contact your congressman, there's nothing they can do. So it can be a big mess. So you really, really want to plan well ahead and apply for your passport as early as possible. Which brings me to my giant warning. In addition to everything I just said, the U.S. Passport Agency has also now stopped allowing people to book last-minute passport appointments, which is something you could do like if you had a trip, an emergency trip that came up and you have to travel right away and you need your passport right now. You've never had one before, or it's expired and you need a new one right now. You used to be able to go to a passport center and get a passport in person as in an emergency basis. And you used to be able to book those appointments online. No longer, thanks, jerks. Bots for opportunistic, unkind people have been sweeping up all the online appointments and then reselling them to desperate travelers for thousands of dollars. So that's fantastic. So to put a stop to that, they had to stop allowing people to book those appointments online. You can still book them on the phone. You can call and book one of those appointments, but you can't book them online anymore. So that's a huge inconvenience for people as well. So I have a few pieces of key passport advice for you in this video. Number 1 is to always have a passport. If you have any intention of traveling internationally, you should always have a passport. Number 2 is to make sure you apply for or renew your passport as soon as possible. Do it right now. Go do it. Do it as early as possible, okay? And my third piece of advice, which this is key, and if people just did this, we wouldn't have all these problems. Never, ever book an international trip that requires a passport until you have a valid passport that is going to be good for at least 6 months after your trip in your hand, okay? Don't do it the other way around like my son's friends did. Don't book a trip and then go, oh, I have this trip coming up. Now I need to get a passport. It's the other way around. Get your passport way early, like when you're thinking, someday I'd like to see Paris and the Eiffel Tower. Someday. Get the passport now. And I don't care if someday is however far in the future. Get the passport now and book the trip after you have the passport in your hand. This is my best advice to you. Don't book international travel and then realize, oh shoot, my passport's going to expire, my passport's not going to be valid, or I don't have a passport. Get the passport first. And it's always, for adults anyway, much easier and quicker to renew your passport than it is to get the initial passport. This brings me to the third very key part of the video. Passports for kids. Getting a passport for your child is a much different and much more complicated thing than getting a passport for yourself. This is something I've been wanting to make a video about for a while because I personally have run into a very complicated situation, and I have read heartbreaking stories online of parents like me who are, single parents or whatever, who find themselves in impossible situations because of the other parent. Okay, and I'm going to share my own personal story with you to explain what I'm talking about. All right, the first thing you have to know, applying for a passport for your child is it's a very different process than applying for a passport for yourself, in that you, the child, and their other parent, so 3 people, must all appear in person to apply for their passport. And not just the first time. Until your child is 16, every time they get a passport is considered applying for an initial passport until they're over the age of 16. So like now Megan is over that age, and so now she can apply for a passport and it'll be good for 10 years, and she will be able to renew it by mail going forward. Not this time, but the next time she gets it. There's no renewing of children's passports as long as they're under 16. You're basically applying for an initial passport each time. So for my kids, that's actually been 3 times for each of them. They got one when they were baby, and then they got one when they were, or 4 times. Then they got one when they were like 5, and then they got one when they were like 10, and then they got one when they were like 15, for example, okay? Each of those requires mom, dad, or whoever the 2 parents are, 2 parents and child, to go physically to the place. So either the county clerk's office at your courthouse or a passport issuing agency, physically in person, all 3 of you, to apply for the passport in person. Okay? And then you have to do the whole thing. You still have to submit the same documents, a birth certificate, fill out certain forms, things like that, pay your money. There is an extra amount of money that you have to pay when you're applying for a passport for a child that you don't have to pay when you're applying as an adult. I can't remember what that's called, but anyway. Okay, and right away I can hear all of you, half of America's going, wait a minute, how am I supposed to do that? From 0 to 16, it requires both parents and child. Okay, well, right away you're saying, we can't both go. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now, only one time for all 3 of my kids were both parents and the child physically at the passport office. But they've had, 3 passports each. So how did I do that? Andrew's dad never went with me to the passport office. How did I do that? All right, here's how you do it. There is a form that the parent who cannot go, they got to work or they live in another state or whatever, can fill out, and you submit that with the rest of the paperwork when you apply for the passport for the child. Now here's the tricky thing. They have to get it notarized. Okay? That form must be signed in the presence of a notary. So that's what Andrew's dad did for me. He's in the military, so it was super easy for him to get the stuff, and get somebody to notarize it. He could just do it in his regular daily work life. So getting that from him was not a problem ever. And then I think one time my ex-husband did do that too. So there is a form if you're on good terms with the other parent. I mean, you're married, for example, but one of you can't go, or, you never were married, or you're divorced or whatever, but you just are on good terms and can communicate with them and have them fill out that form and get it notarized and then send it to you, then you shouldn't have too much of an issue. It's really not a problem. But if you can't get that, then it gets tough. And there are a lot of situations where that's very possible. And that's where I'm going to share my personal story and explain to you what happened the last time that I tried to get passports for Megan and Ben. They do have passports. I did get them, just to tell you right now. Okay, before I do that, I want to add one other important warning for Parents who are not married to the other child's parent, or even if you are, but you're going to be traveling with your child without their other parent, and you and the child do not have the same last name. Immigration is going to notice this. Now, this is something you want. If you're going to be traveling with your child, and this is true like if they go on an international trip with like a school group or something too. If the child is going to be traveling without their parent or with only one parent, and they and that parent that they're traveling with do not share a last name, you're going to want, again, probably notarized, a letter from the other parent saying that they know you're taking the child to such and such place for these dates and that you give your permission, and here's your contact information if they have any questions, okay? This only came up once and it ended up not even mattering. My husband and I, who is not Andrew's dad, took Andrew to London. I got that letter that I just described from Andrew's dad. He happily wrote me a letter and got it notarized and all that, and I took it with us. They never asked to see it, okay? And it's highly possible they might never ask to see it. And I think the reason that they didn't ask to see it was because I had only gotten married in 2002. And I sent my passport in to get my name changed on my passport when I got married. Like you change your name on everything else, your driver's license and all that, your social security card and all that stuff when you get married. You know, like some people do. Okay. But when they sent it back to me, they sent me back the same passport, and they didn't physically change the name in the front thing. They stuck a sticker in the back that said, this person got married and changed her name. Well, the immigration guy didn't even notice it. So he just flipped open to the main page in the front of my passport. He called me and Andrew up to him at immigration when we arrived in London, and a different immigration officer called my husband over. So my husband went over there, and Andrew and I, obviously mom and kid together, he called us over and he looked at the front thing of our passports, and we both had the same last name. So he's like, okay, stamp, stamp. So he never even asked to see the letter. And now I haven't run into a problem with my younger two kids because I was married when I had both of them, and so we all have the same last name now. And I kept my last name after I got divorced, even though, like in my divorce agreement, it says that I can revert to my maiden name if I want to. By the time I got divorced, Andrew was pretty close to being an adult. And so it wasn't so much of an issue for him anymore, but I definitely wanted to keep the same last name as my other two kids, kind of for this reason, honestly, for the reason of like the purpose of traveling and things with school and all of that. It's just, I don't know. It shouldn't be, but sometimes it's an issue when you don't have the same last name as your kids. But so now me, Megan, and Ben all have the same last name now. And so traveling for us internationally isn't a problem. So keep that in mind too. If you're going to be traveling with a child and you know, you're not their parent or you're only one parent, you might want to have a letter with you, because if they ask to see it and you don't have it, that could be a problem, and you could be facing that get out of our country and go back home thing again. And the reason that they do that is very important. They are trying to prevent, well, two things now. Originally, it was parental abductions. The reason they did that is because they were trying to prevent parental abductions where one parent in, you know, like a custody dispute or something takes the child without the other parent's permission out of the country, and now the other parent can't get them back. That was the original reason. That's still true, but more recently, the other big reason that they're doing that is to prevent human trafficking. My kids are actually quite savvy, and every time we go to the airport, Megan kind of drills her brother. Okay, Ben, when we get up to the TSA agent, remember, she makes sure he knows where are we going, when are, you know, and all the information. So if they question Ben separately because they're looking for this, they want to make sure these are my kids and I'm not kidnapping them, I'm not trying to traffic them, whatever. They want to make sure that your kids are safe and comfortable and in an okay situation. So you do want to make sure your kids know where are we going? You know, you don't want them to go up there and just be like, because that can kind of alert the TSA agent or the immigration agent that something might be wrong here. So that's something to be aware of too when you're traveling with kids, that they could potentially ask your child direct questions. They will. They'll ask your child, hey, what's your name? Where are you going? Who's this? You know, and they do have the power to separate you, you know, so they could question your child away from you and you can't be there to like tell them what to say. So that's something to be aware of too when you're traveling with your kids. Now let me share with you the very difficult personal story of when I last got passports for Megan and Ben. Okay, Andrew's no problem. Andrew is now an adult. He's in his 20s. He can renew his own passport by mail. It's no problem. I think the last time he got a passport, he renewed it by mail. It's no problem. Megan is currently, at the time I'm filming this video, 17 years old. When your child is 0 through 15, it's what I said about the 2 parents thing, or the 1 parent has to submit that form. When your child is 16 and 17, just those 2 years. So this will be the case for Megan, unless we wait a few months until she turns 18. At that point, you still have to apply in person, but they only need 1 parent. So Megan is good, because the next time she applies for her passport, she has to go in person again to the county clerk's office. It's right down the street from our house. It's not a problem. And only I have to be with her. So it won't be a problem. And I think if we wait until she's 18, I think she's still going to have to apply, because her passport's going to expire 1 or 2 months after she turns, or before she turns 18. So if we don't have a trip planned, you know, we could just wait till she's 18. And at the time she turns 18, she doesn't need me anymore. She can go and apply for the passport by herself. I mean, I'll probably go with her anyway to help her do it, but she can go and apply by herself, and she does not need her parents anymore. Okay, so Megan's not a problem anymore, but this last time she was. And Ben is still a problem because Ben is not 16 yet. Here's the situation. Knowing how important travel is to me and to our family, especially my 2 sons, Megan's not as big. I mean, she likes it when we travel, but she doesn't live for it the way that the rest of us do, okay? I anticipated this problem. And since I knew that my now ex-husband was not the most reliable person, he's always been terrible about filling out forms. He's very bad about dates and keeping track of things, and a lot of other difficult situations, which is a big part of the reason I'm not married to him anymore. I anticipated this problem knowing what I already knew about how you get passports for children. Let's put it this way. Because of my ex-husband's history, he did not have a leg to stand on in our divorce. Basically, in the divorce, I got everything I wanted. I had a lawyer, and he didn't. He's the one who filed. He filed for divorce, but I had a lawyer and he didn't. And my lawyer made sure that everything I wanted got written in there. One of the things I insisted that they put in that divorce agreement was that my ex-husband must cooperate with getting the children their passports every 5 years. I had that put in a legal document in writing, knowing that this was going to be a problem. And sure enough, it was. 3 years ago or whatever, it came time for my kids to need new passports. And I think I was anticipating, I was well ahead of schedule. It was going to be a while before it's going to be like a year before their passports expired. But at the time, Megan was signed up to go on a trip with school it was like a World War II themed trip. And then later she ended up changing her mind after I went through all this. She ended up changing her mind and not going because she wanted to, this is such a bummer, because she wanted to do the France trip, the French department trip to France and Switzerland the next year instead. And so she dropped out of the history department trip that was going for the World War II thing because it didn't interest her as much, and signed up for the France trip that went to France and Switzerland that was supposed to go in June of 2020, which we've talked about in past videos, which got canceled because of the pandemic. Okay, so poor Megan has never been to Europe yet, even though she was signed up for 2 trips. So it was in anticipation of her going on that and that they were going to need her passport information well in advance of the trip that I was way ahead of schedule, thankfully, getting going on getting new passports for her and Ben. Like I said, you're not renewing when it's a child. It's like you're applying for a brand new passport all over again, even though they've had passports before. Okay, so at the time they were, I don't know, younger than they are now. They both needed the both parents in person thing. Couldn't do it. No idea where my ex-husband is. Okay. No idea. We don't know where he is. Haven't had any contact. At this point, haven't had any contact with my ex-husband in 7 years, 8. I don't know. A long time. I don't know where he is. We had a suspicion we knew where he was. I had an address. Don't know if it's correct or not. No idea. And I emailed him. I had an email. I emailed him, and he kept promising that he was going to get the form that I needed. I even sent him the form like 3 different ways. You know, certified mail, emailed him a digital copy, all of this. He never sent it. He's never going to cooperate. And this is part of the reason I don't have contact with him anymore. Okay, he's not going to cooperate. He doesn't pay child support. He's been, you know, here and there, a little money, but for the most part, owes me tens and thousands of dollars in child support. Okay, so this is not a cooperative, engaged parent who's participating in his children's lives, okay? He's not that. He's completely out of the picture. Okay, so I could not get him to cooperate with sending in the form saying it was okay for me to get the kids' passports, which I had specifically included in the divorce document saying he had to do that he signed. Okay, he signed that and agreed to it and then did not do it. Shocker. Now I have a problem. I can't get my kids their passports because their father will not participate in this process. If you find yourself in a situation like this, which I know many people do, there is a form called a special circumstances form. Your county clerk will have it. She took it out of her file drawer and handed it to me. And remember, I've got 2 kids, so I was doing 2 totally separate applications. I mean, even though I did them at the same time, just for convenience sake for myself, I had to have the same forms for both kids, okay? I went to great lengths. You have to prove to the State Department that you did everything you could to try to locate the other parent and get them to cooperate. So you have to keep a paper trail. And this involves things like I had to send him stuff certified mailed. I had to try to have him served by a process server. I had to try to check the Social Security records to make sure he wasn't dead. I had to check prison records. I had to go through this whole big long thing and keep a paper trail to show that I had made every reasonable attempt to locate and get the cooperation of my ex-husband in this process. Okay, so I did all that. Doing all that took more time and cost more money than my actual divorce. Just to tell you, okay? So, not fun. But in the end, because I did all that and because I was able to send in that, especially this helped me, because I was able to send in a copy of my divorce agreement that he had signed saying that he was supposed to cooperate and, you know, he didn't. That helped me huge. So I sent all this stuff in with the kids' passport applications or I had to take it to the county clerk and she sent it in with the checks and with the special circumstances forms for each of them, and then send it in. And then I remember there was a period of phone tag. The State Department employee who was assigned to my case, like, kept trying to call me for some reason or whatever. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And it was super stressful at the time and really a pain. But once we finally talked to each other and connected, she was very nice. Why do I want to think it's like South Carolina where the passport agency is now? Because I remember she had a Southern accent. But anyway, once I actually talked to her and she like confirmed the couple things she needed or whatever, I had those passports in 2 days. They came so fast. I couldn't believe it. It blew me away how fast they came. So I just want to explain to you that if you find yourself in a very difficult situation like that, you can still get passports for your kids, but it's a chore. You want to ask for that special circumstances form or get it off the State Department's website and follow the instructions exactly and make sure that you fill it out completely and accurately. And then, good luck. And especially with the extra processing time it takes to get anybody's passport right now, that whole, ordeal plus the extra time you need to get a passport right now could take a lot of time. This was a months-long process that I had to go through. So I just can't emphasize enough how important it is that you apply for passports as soon as possible if you think you're ever going to need them. That's the main thing I want you to take away from this. And I really hope that this was helpful to you, sharing all this information. I know this is a very long video, but I really hope that this was helpful to you because passports are a very important part of travel. And if you don't have a passport, you're really going to be limited to basically your own country for the most part. And if you don't live in a very big country, that's not going to be very much. So, it's really a good idea to get a passport. We value ours greatly. So right now, coming up on that, where the kids' passports are going to be expiring in like a year and a half, I'm debating what to do about Ben. I think I'm probably going to do it again and do the special circumstances form again. And I should have a little bit easier time of it now that they've already had to do it once and our situation hasn't changed. So I hope that that's the case. But it is nice that I won't have to go through all that with Megan this time. Just be aware there's a lot of extra stuff involved with getting passports for your kids that's different from getting a passport for yourself as an adult. And I really hope that this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions or if you have, a nightmare story like mine and you want to share it in the comments below, please put those down there. I will answer all your questions to the best of my ability. I've had a lot of experience with applying for passports over the years, for myself, my parents, my husband, my kids, multiple times in each case. So I'm happy to help you if you have any questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you appreciated this and if this was helpful to you, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. And again, if you enjoy and are interested in travel content, I make all sorts of travel videos, lots of vlogs, lots of tips, lots of funny stories. So if you would like to continue seeing those, please be sure that you're subscribed to my channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of my new videos. Have a great day, everyone, and safe travels.